Hi, I'm really glad to be here today. My name's Jennifer Simpson, and I'm the Provost and Vice President Academic at Ryerson University. And Tony, it's great to be here with you.
It's wonderful to be here today. My name is Tanya Mello. I go by Tony, as you heard Jennifer say, and I'm the Assistant Dean of Students at the Lincoln Alexander School of Law.
I think the folks who are watching us and others, this is a really serious, that's why folks are here. That's why we're doing this Q&A. Because this question of renaming the institution at this moment, it's serious. You know, it's exciting, and we've had great conversations with each other. I think there's been a gravitas and a level of really careful deliberation. That's what I've seen from the committee members. The committee members have been so thoughtful and careful with this process. And we're preparing. The committee members have always looked at the materials and thought about how this matters. So I really want to underscore that we feel the opportunity of this, but also the responsibility.
When I first met you, it was about talking about how we would work and how this committee would come to be in terms of us working as chair and vice chair. And what you've said for me is the reason that I wanted to do the work. This idea that it would be driven and centered around community engagement and understanding that this entire process was about a process, not just an outcome. And that the community would be involved, but that the broader community of stakeholders, people that care about this university, and people that care about its future would be really, really connected. But I want to give a little bit about a context for folks, because I thought, if I was watching, what would I want to know? And what I want to share first is that, you know, we have all of these questions that came in, and they're really good questions which give us insight into what's really pressing for our community. And I think this kind of session that we're doing is reflective of the way the entire process has gone, right? Where we came together as a committee to think about what our mandate was and what the outcome was at the end of this committee. And it actually started in September, where our Board of Governors decided that they would accept the entire suite of recommendations from the Standing Strong Task Force. And for those of you who haven't read the report, it is accessible, it is powerful. I think it is such an important statement about how seriously we are taking this. And one of the big pieces in it was the renaming of the institution of Ryerson. And in deciding that, we decided to strike up this University Renaming Advisory Committee, which you and I have co-chaired. I'm the vice chair and you're the chair. And what was powerful was to think of, okay, what's the mandate of the committee and who the membership is going to be. And for me, what I want to make really clear is the mandate of the committee was never to come up with a final name. And I am saying that, and Jennifer is laughing, because everywhere we go, everybody says, what's the name? And I have an idea. My aunt from Northern Yukon has an idea for you. And I have loved that. But the idea behind it hasn't been that this committee is going to come out, you know, pull names out of a hat and decide at a dinner party, though I would have loved that, by the way. But rather that it would be a really rigorous process of research, of community engagement, of what we have had, which is a 3-week-long survey that was opened up to anybody that felt that they were a stakeholder, that they were connected to us, that had membership, alumni, students, faculty, staff, people that live around this area, to give us their input on what they thought was important in thinking about a name. Not the name itself, but in thinking about a name. And what really came out that was powerful was that the community was really united in a way I didn't expect from a survey results. We had 30,000 responses. And in those responses, what was shocking was we broke it down into, do you identify as alumni, staff, faculty, all this kind of stuff. We also said demographically, how do you identify? In terms of age, race, those kinds of things. And we looked at the divisions, and what we found is the community was really unified. And there were several things that came out that I remember we've spoken so much about. The first is that folks really wanted us to think about our name being attached to a location, and to this location, this place. And that was so powerful, and thinking about what that meant for the people that have been caregivers of this land and the people that are on this land right now. The second big thing that was really important was to attach and make sure that the name reflected our values, our principles, and our aspirations. And I know President Lashmi has talked so much about thinking about the name as aspirational and what it'll mean for our community in the future, not just today, in this moment, but in the future. And another thing that came out that was powerful was that folks really didn't want the name to be attached or commemorate a notable person, right? So that was something, and across the board, there wasn't a group that disagreed. They didn't want it to be, and one of the things that we think is important to share with the community is the name will not reflect a notable person, because we wanted to take that feedback and take it in really seriously and hold it as we move forward. So having 30,000 people come forward, I did not expect that we would also have 2,200 names. So the task before our committee has been huge. The public survey was so important. And we've looked at it in this multifaceted way, right? To understand that it's about knowing that we had this history and that we're not trying to erase a history, that we want to be proud of who we were, but we want this name to reflect where we're going as a community, which I think is so beautiful. We were also really clear about that we are not going to make this a popularity vote. This is not about, the committee's going to decide, and if 5 people agree, that's what we're going with. But we would use this process and these principles to help us come up with the criteria and rationale for what a short list of names could be. And this is a big one because everyone says to me, what's the name, what's the name? And what I say is, no, the committee's not picking the name. We are providing a short list of names that will go to President Lashmi for his consideration. We will have rationale for those names that we have come up with over the last 10 months to make sure that it's something that's robust, and that President Lashmi will make that decision along with the Board of Governors. It goes out of our hands to the Board of Governors. What is exciting, and I think nerve-wracking for us, is that that decision is coming in the next few weeks in terms of the short list, not the final decision. And I think that that's going to be really, really powerful. I also think, and I know this is a point that I really wanted to make clear, we want a name that unifies our community, and as a result, we're not going to make the shortlist public before so people can vote on it. It's not about popularity. It's about one that unifies our committee and reflects our values and our aspirations, and does that through this process that I know you and I are both so proud of. I want to say we've had meetings every single week, sometimes more than once a week, very long meetings, tons of work behind the scenes. And I want to turn this over to you, Jennifer, and ask, we had a question from Richard, yes, which is around, in summary, can you actually tell us the basis for renaming the university? I've gone through the process and the context, but what would you say the basis is, Jennifer, for renaming?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thanks, Tony, for giving so much background information. I think emphasizing what's been critical are these pieces of what's come together, the committee and the rich committee membership, all of our colleagues that we've been working with, and then the community engagement has just been terrific. And I think pointed to, as President Lashmi, as Mohammed has said, this is about aspirations. And what's been terrific is that so many people have been interested in showing up for that conversation about how we're going to move forward towards those aspirations together. So in thinking about the basis for the renaming, that's a big question and an important one. And I'll first reference, this project. It has a kind of history and some background. And one thing that includes is the work of the Standing Strong Task Force. And, it's interesting because the task force was actually operating well before I got to Ryerson. So it was something, even me coming into this role, you mentioned the kind of excitement about being able to serve in our roles as chair and vice chair. Coming into the role at Ryerson was seeing the work, paying attention to, there's this task force. They're looking at big questions for Ryerson. And the task force, the Standing Strong Task Force, which was led by Joanne Dallaire, our Indigenous elder at the university, and Catherine Ellis, a professor in history, as co-chairs, the task force was really a continuation of Ryerson's commitment to equity and to anti-colonialism. And that's what's so exciting for me. So I want to kind of the work of the committee is really grounded in those conversations that the task force had, which was an incredible moment for Ryerson to say, okay, we're going to recognize that this name, it poses challenges. Yeah. Ryerson, it poses some challenges. It for some in this community, it causes harm. For others, it raises questions. Who was Ryerson? What is his connection to public life at his time historically? What does that mean for Ryerson? So again, I want to express really deep thank you and gratitude to the work of the task force for really grappling in difficult, complex, and reflective ways with those questions. The task force made 22 recommendations. And you and I are really excited about this one right now. It's a very public-facing recommendations. It's so exciting that we're at this moment. The other recommendations are also incredibly important for the ways in which Ryerson moves forward as an institution, as a place of higher education that's committed to asking, once we acknowledge what's wrong, like I like to think about this, is we name what's wrong and then we imagine and work towards what's next. So the task force kind of set us on that way with the 22 recommendations. Ryerson was a really interesting individual. And a couple things I've learned over the past several months are that in some ways he was a friend of people working at equity and anti-racism, anti-colonialism. He did some things in his life that said, yes, I think this movement is the movement we should be making. And then there were other moments when he didn't show up in that way. There were other moments. One example is when there was leaders around schooling and education were suggesting that schools should be segregated. And in that moment, Ryerson had an opportunity to say, no, segregation, that's not going to lead us into an equitable future. And he didn't insert that thought at that moment. And that's problematic. So I think, again, history is complex. Individuals are complex. It's integral to remember that thinking about this renaming, it's about Ryerson and our current name, and it's so much about where we want to go. And it's also about the diversity of this community and honoring the values that we have been holding for years, for decades. Ryerson's been working at these values. And I think what's exciting about this moment is, and the renaming, this is coming back to your question, how did this all get started? With the Standing Strong Task Force, with Ryerson's willingness to ask questions. To ask questions about what does it mean that we have this name right now? How do we want to go forward? And how is that connected within the context? This is a national question. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Canada, we are asking as a country, what does it mean to acknowledge the harm and violence done by colonialism and what's going to happen next? So this name is grounded in Ryerson saying, we're going to show up to that hard question. And we're going to think about how can we think about our name going forward in ways that, as you said, Tony, make room for everyone at Ryerson to feel a connection with and that reflect those values and aspirations. So I'll come back now to Ben's question, which is how many of the suggestions for a potential name were taken from the anonymous suggestions from the community survey, and how many were taken to suggestions brought forward by those committee members?
This is such an important question. I couldn't agree more, Jennifer. And I think we have to start with talking about the committee again. As you will hear throughout this entire session, Jennifer and I it was a very close-knit group that worked extremely hard to think about a process that would be effective. And so I want to start by saying the committee members represented the diversity of our community and the fact that they all had an understanding of working with different stakeholder groups directly. So they had lived experience, professional experience, and we asked them to bring their perspectives and their experience of the groups that they had worked with to the process. And we wanted to come up with a collective way forward to ensure that we were bringing in this community feedback and also understanding some of the logistical, legal, political, cultural considerations you have to have in a name, right? So this thing that we talked about before where you want to have an open process, but is within a structure that we can think about that will guide us so that we have a successful name for the university. And I learned so much in this process. So we had this 2,200 names came anonymously, Ben. And then in addition to that, we had a firm that helped us and looked at the structure, the guidelines, the principles, the values that came up, this decision that most of the community wanted us to focus on location. And they were able to generate through that process an additional 400 names. And then this is where the debates began, right? So we have been in the thick of this now for the last few months, and we continue to do so, where the debate is one that I find it's not only rigorous and deep, but it is one where I have seen people openly say, I have evolved because of this discussion. I changed my mind because of 4 points that were made last week, and I want to share that. And I think that was the most powerful. And I know you and I both said several times that that happened to us. And our big job as a committee, again, is not to come up with a name, though committee members, based on these principles and the 2,200 suggestions, were open to also adding their own suggestions to the roster as members of our community, but was to narrow this list in a meaningful way, so that it would be a name that reflected our values and aspirations, so that it would be a name that reflected the community feedback, and that it would be aspirational, but we didn't have 2,200 to work with every day, right? So that got narrowed. We had a lot of help from the firm whose role it is and experience it is to do that. And I think what was most meaningful to me is how rigorous the discussions were and how much we all changed over these few months in terms of how we came to it. That was the most powerful part. And interestingly, if I can ask you a question that came from the student gala, which is, are we taking into consideration the importance of a neutral name? And that a lot of people said, we don't want notable, we don't want something that could divide our community, we want to unify. How have we responded to this idea of having a neutral name? Is that even possible, Jennifer?
Tony, thanks so much for that question from Gala about kind of what should a name be? You know, what kind of work does a name need to do? And I think in thinking about that, what I've really been aware of, you know, with the consultation period, with the committee, we've been talking about words, sets of words. What's going to be our name? What I've noticed, and I think if anyone thinks for even 30 seconds, we'll realize this, a name is something that we live with and that we live in and that we can put our hands on, that we can touch, that we get excited about, that holds memories and stories and futures and pasts. A name, you know, it's so interesting how a simple word or set of words can then become something so complex and layered. So that's what I want the name at Ryerson to represent in response to Gala, which is such a great question. I want that name to be something that people feel they can touch. It's like something you put your hands on, that your heart can connect to, that your head can connect to. To do that, it has to be a name that can bring in the diversity of our community, a name that can encompass and feel a connection, represent a connection for many, many people and the diversity of this institution. So how did we think about that? That kind of, when we're choosing a name, that kind of emotional or affective, logical, all those pieces that need to be part of a name, how did we as a committee kind of work through what's going to serve us well with that objective in working out a short list? And so I'm just going to read some of the considerations that were top of mind for us. And this was an attempt, this was our work at being systematic and methodical about our process to have a high level of rigor in our conversation. Does the name leave room for, open up to a diversity of perspectives? Does it fit within post-secondary sector practices? Is this name going to keep us connected in the education world? Does it kind of situate us amongst universities as a whole? Does it align with the university's strategic vision? Is it legally available and ownable? A really necessary question. It has to be legally available and ownable. Does it pass cross-cultural and global linguistics checks? We are a community with lots of languages, with lots of cultural backgrounds. What meanings or resonance does this name take on in different settings? Can it be abbreviated to a workable acronym, to an acronym that works well for the university and those stories that we want to tell about ourselves? And another consideration, the domain name and the social media elements that come with that name, are they ownable? Can we own those names? So this list, I think, helps all of us to remember it's what the committee really, in our returning, we've emphasized that returning to the name and what does this mean for us? How do we sit with this? These questions were consistently in the mix. So we kind of came to a short list that is workable in a wide sense and at all these levels.
We have a great question from alumni that I want to know the answer to. And I know my parents want to know this answer because they love our colors. So the question's from Doug. And Doug wants to know if the Rams or the colors blue and gold will change. And I'm telling you, my parents are listening.
So the question of the mascot's a really important question. We're not sure yet. That's going to be a separate process. We've got a set of recommendations that we mentioned earlier. One of those is about the mascot. The mascot may change. There needs to be further reflection, and that will come next. So folks can stay tuned on that next chapter website, and we'll include updates there about that process, what's happening there. So I have a different answer for the colors. The colors will stay the same. This is really what we're going through is a renaming exercise. And so the colors of blue and gold, which when I saw those colors too, I was so excited. Like, you know, when you move, I came from a different institution, I love the blue and gold. So that will stay. That was a decision from the beginning that this would be a renaming exercise. It was, in fact, as we know, a question asked by committee members. Will we be talking? No. And in fact, the blue and gold, which represent the water and sun, there's a connection there. There's a reason for those colors. They will remain the same. And so we can look forward to, again, some consultation on a new mascot, but the colors remaining the same. We're really just, our committee is really working at the name aspect of the university.
And I want to be clear to our committee who's listening that you will not be doing the mascot. We are done. We are very shortly done. We have taken a lot of time of these incredible people's lives.
Yeah. I'll also just highlight that we'll also be retaining, like I said, we're retaining the colors. We'll also retain fonts and graphics, and this will also help, as you mentioned earlier, Tony, maintain that sense of continuity, not only for alumni, but also for everyone at Ryerson. So by changing the name and leaving a lot of these other things intact, it will kind of underline or make possible a strong sense of continuity with the reality and those stories and that connection that is Ryerson. So, Tony, I'm going to ask another question from a staff member who's Kathy. And what Kathy is wanting to know, will there be a phased approach to implementing the name change, or will it be a coordinated effort to update all publicly visible branded terms when the new name is officially our legal name?
So Kathy, the amount of work that goes into this is astronomical. It has to be very coordinated, that it will be a phased approach. It just necessarily needs to be. From our end, Jennifer and mine, the committee has committed to having a short list of names for the president by the end of this academic year, so by the next month, to have that process gone. But I didn't know this, and some of you may be interested in this. The Ryerson Act has to be changed and provincially amended. So that's in the hands of the provincial government, which is outside of our kind of control. And once that amendment is made, all of our legal documents, our degrees, everything sort of is legally changed to the new name. So that said, we can actually start using the name in very meaningful ways. So things like on your LinkedIn, on your CV, your social media in general, when you're talking about the institution. So that transition can happen much more quickly, but things like huge signs with our name might take a little bit more time. Many departments across the university are going to be involved in a very coordinated and targeted way to help and ensure that units know their roles, their responsibilities. There will be a lot of support around the name change. In terms of knowing where things are changing after this session, we have this wonderful website called The Next Chapter, website that many people have been clicking on, and it has frequently asked questions. When the new name is released, it will be on the website right away. It will help you to understand more quickly what's going on and what phase we're in.
Great.
So we have a question that I think is very related again to the name and how it affects people right now. And it's from a student named Christy. And Christy, I'm guessing, is graduating. So if you are Christy, I want to congratulate you on graduation, especially in COVID. It's been so difficult. And Christy wants to know, will graduates of the spring 2022 convocation, which is happening in a few months, have the new name on their diploma? Or does the timeline suggest that it'll be applied on diplomas earliest next year? When is it, Jennifer? Yeah. Give us a sense.
Yeah, Christy, Tony, Christy's asked such a good question. So many students have asked the same question. So I'm going to speak both to current students and then also to alumni. So first of all, as mentioned, all legal documents must reflect our current legal name. They have to line up. And that includes, legal documents includes parchments and academic records. For students, current students, diplomas that are available at the spring 2022 convocation will say Ryerson University. But over the next couple of months, we'll be sharing more information with students who have applied to graduate. We'll be able to let those students know what you can do to change your parchment. Alumni of the university will have two options, their choice. The first option is to carry forward, to hold on to their existing parchment, leave things as they are. The second option for all alumni is that those who want to change their parchment can request a reissue of their parchment once the legal name change has occurred, and the reissued document, the reissued parchment, will bear the new name. So alumni have that choice. And now finally, a related question this is from another alumni named Sonia. What do we do with the memorabilia? We've got all this swag and stuff we love about Ryerson, our t-shirts and hats, and what do we do with all that stuff?
You know, I have to say, we really hope that people do not see this as an erasing of everything that we were in the past, right? The beauty of this and the nuance that we've been talking about this entire sort of fireside chat, it's not about erasing or changing our history. There are many things in that history we're incredibly proud of. And one of the things that came up for me in all of the community feedback was people have a connection to this institution that they're proud of, that's their contribution. And the things that happened with professors, faculty, staff, community members, volunteer work they did through this institution that has nothing to do with Edgerton Ryerson. And so we want you to hold that and be proud of it. You can wear the memorabilia, have the keychains, whatever it is you have. and hold that with pride. And for those of you who feel comfortable and want to do that, we ask you to wear that stuff branded and hold on to that history that you were a part of. It is not about one person being this entire institution, but the 40,000 plus students that came in every single year that made us who we were. So what I feel, and I say this all the time, it's up to you what you feel comfortable with. There will be many people in the community, I'm one of them, that isn't likely to wear Ryerson on there, because for me, it can cause harm for some people. There are others that will say, I have a pride to when I went, which is 1970 or 1980, right? And we want you to feel that pride and hold on to it.
So Tony, it's been really great to be in this conversation with you today. It's been great because to work with you as colleagues, like we really got to know each other, like you said, in person, which was amazing. It must have been in August or September. I think what both of us were excited about from the start of this is the opportunity it represents for Ryerson. Like, what a big deal to be at this moment. And not only is it about the opportunity of a new name and finding a name that all of our diverse community can kind of live in. I want to make a note, like I talked about, a name is something we kind of get used to, that we live in, that holds stories and memories and events and all kinds of things. That part of this process that I've realized really, and several committee members have said this, sometimes I wasn't immediately excited about all the names. I thought, really? How is that going to work? But then the next week, we had the conversation 1 week. I thought about it, heard from other people, came back, and I had shifted. And several committee members mentioned that. So I'll ask for, I think curiosity and openness will be really helpful in this. If that name doesn't strike you right away, it might in a week or so. I want to come back to that opportunity, that what was so important to me about this and working with you on this was not just the opportunity of a new name, but it's that we're thinking about a new name in the context of equity and anti-colonialism. I don't know what reason could be more important for us to gather as a community and work at this together. And when I think about this, and I came to Ryerson in the midst of this process to moving towards a new name, I felt so excited that I was coming into an institution that had picked up this question. They didn't turn away from the question. Ryerson did not turn away. We said, you know what? From Mohammed, senior leadership across the university, we want to tackle this question. And starting with the task force, getting to now us chairing this committee, and that's what's exciting to me, is that we're at a point where with our colleagues on the committee, we've considered what can that new name be that takes us forward. And it was just great, Tony, to do that work with you.
I feel the same way. I have to tell you, when I first came into it, I was nervous. I understood the gravity of what this means. And I think the name is extraordinarily important and symbolic. And it's not the only thing that is important. For me, so much of what's important about this institution is the work we do, who we hire, whether they feel like they have a voice when they come into a room, how students feel in our atmosphere, and what happens when you leave. So for me, it wasn't just about the name, but what that name means. And many of us, I came to Ryerson not knowing the history of Edgerton Ryerson, but I knew Ryerson as an institution that cared about equity, diversity, inclusion, as you've said, that wanted a human rights-centered campus, that cared about innovation and meeting people where they were in the community. And that's the reason I came here. And that was the brand that this university had, and it will continue to be the brand. I see it in the way we work, in the process, and I will tell you, your leadership had a huge impact on me. Working with the new provost that I didn't know, and worried about a committee that I wanted to make sure we did a process that was so meaningful, right? We keep saying, it's not just the name that matters, it's the process and what we did as a community to get there. And I think many of us have said on the committee, we're so proud of where we came. Yeah. And how we got to it. And the last thing I want to say is that I really do think you're right about it takes a while for the name to sort of sink in. It's like wearing a new pair of shoes. So give yourself some time. There were things that evolved in the conversations, and you will feel differently over time when the name first comes out. And also know that the name is not everything. What we are is an institution of people that are committed to principles, values, and future aspirations, and that work will be tied to the name wherever we go in the world. And I'm proud of that.
Yeah. Thanks, Tony. Well said.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for this conversation. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you.